The most dangerous weapon is not the one raised against you. It is the one you never see. A blade does not need to be sharp if you walk into it willingly. A trap does not need to be hidden if you believe you are safe. The greatest threats in your life will never look like enemies. They will look familiar. Comfort. Shared laughter. History. They sit beside you, not across from you. They know your habits, your routines, your blind spots. They don't rush you. They wait. Because predators do not chase what will walk into the trap on its own. Think carefully about this. How many times have you warned yourself about danger out there, strangers, rivals, competitors, enemies you could name and point to? And how rarely have you questioned the danger near you? The one who knows when you're tired, when you're uncertain, when you're emotionally exposed. The one who hears your plans before they fail, your fears before they form, your ambitions before they harden. A snake does not strike from the road. It strikes from the grass you step into barefoot. And betrayal does not feel like violence at first. It feels like confusion. It feels like a small moment that doesn't sit right. A joke that cuts just a little too deep. Support that arrives late. Silence where enthusiasm used to be. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. That's why most people miss it. Because they expect danger to be loud. They expect enemies to announce themselves with hostility, aggression, or confrontation. But real social threats operate in whispers. In omissions. In timing. They don't destroy you head-on. They destabilize you slowly. First your confidence. Then your clarity. Then your position. By the time you realize what happened, the damage is already rationalized as misunderstanding, bad luck, or just how things turned out. And that is the most lethal part. Because when danger hides inside normalcy, you don't defend yourself. You explain it away. You protect the image of the relationship instead of protecting yourself. You tell yourself stories like, "They didn't mean it. They're just stressed. They've always been there for me. I'm probably overthinking." And in doing so, you offer them something more valuable than trust. You offer them continued access. Access to your emotions. Your plans. Your vulnerabilities. Most people are not destroyed by enemies. They are dismantled by proximity. By those close enough to observe without being questioned. Close enough to influence without being suspected. You do not lose first because someone attacks you. You lose because you lower your guard in the wrong presence. This is why the greatest danger in your life will never feel dangerous. It will feel familiar. Niccolò Machiavelli is often dismissed as cold, immoral, even cruel. This misunderstanding is convenient. Because if you label the observer as evil, you never have to confront the truth of what he observed. Machiavelli was not interested in how people should behave. He studied how they do behave when power, fear, and self-interest are involved. He stripped human interaction down to its mechanics. And what he found disturbed people who preferred comforting illusions. Machiavelli understood something most never do. That betrayal is not an exception in human relationships. It is a function. A predictable outcome when incentives shift. He did not write for optimists. He wrote for survivors. And survival, to him, required clarity without sentiment. One of his most uncomfortable observations was this. Men are quick to offend those who make themselves loved, but they hesitate to offend those who make themselves feared. This is not an endorsement of cruelty. It is a warning about predictability. Love, when unguarded, creates entitlement. Fear, when measured, creates restraint. Machiavelli saw that people rarely betray out of malice. They betray when loyalty becomes inconvenient, when circumstances change, when power shifts, when proximity offers opportunity. He observed that people are loyal while it costs them nothing. But when loyalty requires sacrifice, most recalculate. This recalculation is quiet, internal, rationalized. People do not wake up and decide to betray. They convince themselves it is necessary, justified, deserved. And this is why fake friends are so dangerous. Not because they plot your downfall in secret rooms, but because when the moment arrives, when pressure appears, they choose themselves without hesitation. Machiavelli warned that those who rise often create enemies not by wrongdoing, but by difference. Your success reminds others of their limitations. Your growth destabilizes existing hierarchies. Your independence threatens dependency. And because envy is shameful, it hides. Envy does not scream. It smiles. It disguises itself as advice, concern, just being honest. Machiavelli knew that people closest to power are most tempted to exploit it. And closeness does not require authority. It requires access. The ability to influence perception, timing, narratives. Fake friends rarely attack your strength directly. They attack your judgment. They plant doubt where confidence once lived. They delay when momentum matters. They distort reality just enough that you hesitate. And hesitation is often all that's needed. Machiavelli's worldview is not about paranoia. It is about asymmetry. You may see the relationship as emotional. They see it as strategic. You share openly. They observe selectively. You assume mutual goodwill. They assume self-interest. This imbalance is where destruction begins. Machiavelli would tell you this plainly. Never confuse familiarity with loyalty. Never confuse shared history with shared destiny. People change when incentives change. And the most dangerous moment is when you believe someone is incapable of harming you. Because that belief removes your vigilance. Machiavelli did not hate people. He simply refused to lie to himself about them. And that refusal is what made him dangerous, not to others, but to illusion. In a world governed by appearances, the one who sees clearly is always misunderstood. But he is rarely surprised. Most people do not fail socially because they are weak. They fail because they interpret reality through the wrong lens. That lens is morality. From childhood, you are trained to evaluate people in terms of good and bad. Nice or mean. Kind or cruel. Loyal or disloyal. This framework is useful for teaching children how to behave. It is catastrophic for understanding how adults actually operate under pressure. Morality is about intention. Power is about effect. And the world does not reward intention. It rewards outcomes. This is where most people become vulnerable without realizing it. They assume that because they operate from sincerity, others do too. They assume that kindness creates goodwill. That loyalty inspires loyalty. That transparency builds trust. These assumptions feel noble. They are also predictable. And predictability is not safety. It is exposure. When your behavior is governed by fixed moral rules, you become legible, readable, forecastable. Others know how you will react before you do. They know you won't retaliate. They know you'll explain. They know you'll give the benefit of the doubt. They don't need to overpower you. They just need to wait you out. This is the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Goodness does not repel manipulation. It attracts it. Not because manipulators are hunting goodness, but because goodness without boundaries is efficient to exploit. A person who cannot say no is not virtuous. They are convenient. A person who must always be fair is not moral. They are predictable. A person who always assumes the best is not enlightened. They are exposed. Machiavelli understood that morality, when detached from realism, becomes a liability. He saw that people who pride themselves on being good often outsource their judgment to that identity. They stop observing. They stop testing. They stop recalibrating. They rely on the idea of goodness to protect them. But goodness has no defensive function on its own. It does not prevent betrayal. It does not stop envy. It does not neutralize self-interest. In fact, it often signals safety to those who intend harm. Because the morally rigid individual is slow to adapt. They hesitate to update their beliefs about others. They say things like, "I don't want to think that way. That seems cynical. I'm not like that." And that hesitation is the opening. The world is not divided into good people and bad people. It is divided into those who understand incentives and those who ignore them. When you cling to moral purity, you make a silent promise. I will not change, even if circumstances do. Others hear this promise, even if unconsciously. And they adjust. They learn how to push without resistance. How to extract without consequence. How to benefit without reciprocating. This is why moral outrage often replaces strategic thinking. People sense they are being used, but instead of adjusting behavior, they moralize the situation. They say, "How could someone do this? This is wrong. They shouldn't act this way. All true. All useless." Because outrage does not protect you. Understanding does. At some point, if you are honest, you realize something unsettling. The problem was never that fake friends exist. The problem was that you were available to them. Not available in time. Available in access. Your thoughts were open. Your emotions were visible. Your intentions were readable. You mistook openness for strength. Transparency for virtue. Accessibility for loyalty. And the world taught you otherwise. This is the moment most people recoil. They try to go back. Back to innocence. Back to trust without friction. Back to believing closeness equals safety. But you cannot unknow what you now see. And trying to return to naivety only creates bitterness. The transformation is not into someone cruel. It is into someone unavailable to misuse. The naive person moves through the world hoping to be understood. The strategic person moves through the world observing. Not judging. Not condemning. Observing. You begin to notice patterns instead of personalities. Timing instead of tone. Behavior instead of words. Consistency instead of intensity. You stop reacting to how things feel. And start measuring how things function. This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional sovereignty. Your inner world becomes private territory. Not everyone is allowed entry. Not everyone deserves context. Not everyone earns explanation. You realize something profound. Power is not dominance. It is insulation. Insulation from manipulation. From projection. From other people's unresolved hunger. You no longer rush to clarify misunderstandings. You no longer defend yourself against insinuations. You no longer chase alignment. You let people reveal themselves. Silence becomes a filter. Distance becomes a diagnostic tool. You understand that true allies do not need constant reassurance. And false ones panic when access is reduced. This is when your identity shifts. From participant to observer. From emotional actor to quiet strategist. From someone inside every room to someone who can leave without loss. You stop confusing presence with value. You stop proving yourself. You stop offering explanations to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Like stone, you become heavy, not loud. Like architecture, you become deliberate, not reactive. The lion does not announce awareness. It simply sees. Here is the final truth most people resist. Fake friends are not the core threat. They are a symptom. The real vulnerability was internal. Your hunger to be liked. Your need to be validated. Your impulse to rescue, include, explain, soften. These impulses are not evil. But they are exploitable. Every manipulator, every quiet saboteur, every false ally relies on one thing: your participation. They cannot access what you do not offer. They cannot use what you no longer display. Once you master yourself, the external threat collapses. Because manipulation requires appetite. And discipline starves quietly. You stop needing agreement. You stop chasing belonging. You stop confusing attention with respect. You learn that real loyalty is not loud. It is consistent. Unimpressed. Unthreatened by your growth. And rare. Very rare. So rare that solitude becomes preferable to false company. Not because you distrust everyone, but because you finally trust your perception. You are no longer naive. You are precise. No longer emotionally exposed, but internally ordered. No longer easily accessed, but deeply grounded. You move through the world like an architect, not a guest. You build boundaries before bridges. You test before trusting. You observe before engaging. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. Stone does not need to announce its strength. Sand explains itself endlessly. You have chosen a stone. If this resonated, stay. Subscribe. This channel is not for everyone. Most will reject this perspective. They will call it cold, or cynical, or unnecessary. That's how you know it's real. Those who see, remain. Those who remain are no longer easy to destroy. And that, quietly, changes everything. The problem is not that others lack morality. The problem is that you expect morality to restrain them. It won't. Only consequence does. To see clearly, you must remove emotion from the equation. Not suppress it, remove it. Betrayal feels personal. But it is structural. It is not driven by hatred. It is driven by self-interest under constraint. Human beings are not loyal by default. They are adaptive. Loyalty emerges when it aligns with survival, status, or self-image. The moment loyalty threatens one of these, it weakens. This is not pessimism. It is mechanics. Every social environment operates under scarcity. There is limited attention, limited recognition, limited advancement, limited influence. Even in friendships. Especially in friendships that exist within competitive environments, workplaces, social hierarchies, creative circles, families with inheritance, communities with status. When two people occupy the same space, comparison is automatic. And comparison breeds hierarchy. Hierarchy breeds tension. Most people are not consciously malicious, but they are unconsciously comparative. They measure who is ahead, who is admired, who is listened to, who is rising. When you begin to outpace someone close to you, a quiet recalculation begins. Not always consciously, but reliably. Your success changes the relationship's balance. And balance matters more than affection. This is where envy enters, not as rage, but as discomfort. Envy is not wanting what you have. It is resenting what your possession says about them. Your growth becomes a mirror they didn't ask to look into. And because envy feels shameful, it hides. It does not announce itself as jealousy. It disguises itself as concern, advice, realism, humor, silence. Envy does not want to destroy you openly. It wants to restore equilibrium, often by slowing you down. This is why betrayal so often comes from those who once benefited from your support. They remember a version of you that made them comfortable. When you outgrow that role, the relationship threatens their identity. An identity is defended more fiercely than friendship. Machiavelli understood that people justify betrayal internally long before they act. They tell themselves stories. They're changing. They don't need me anymore. They're becoming arrogant. I've done so much for them. These narratives are not lies, they are rationalizations. They allow the person to preserve their self-image while acting against you. This is why betrayal rarely feels cruel to the betrayer. It feels necessary. Necessary to protect status. Necessary to reclaim relevance. Necessary to avoid feeling small. And proximity makes this easier. The closer someone is to you, the more data they have. Your fears. Your weaknesses. Your blind spots. They don't need to attack your strengths. They just need to apply pressure at the right moment. Delay a message. Withhold information. Plant doubt before a decision. Question your confidence when timing matters. Small actions. Large effects. This is why betrayal often looks accidental. Unintentional. It just happened. But nothing just happens in power dynamics. Everything emerges from incentives. And the most dangerous incentive is asymmetry. When you see the relationship as emotional, and they see it as strategic. When you value harmony, and they value position. When you assume goodwill, and they assume self-preservation. This asymmetry allows them to move first, and justify it later. Machiavelli would warn you. The person most capable of harming you is the one who does not need to hate you to do it. They only need a reason. And reasons appear when pressure arrives. History does not repeat itself in detail. It repeats itself in structure. Names change. Settings evolve. Technology advances. But human incentives remain intact. Every major betrayal in history shares three traits: proximity, timing, vulnerability. Remove any one of these, and betrayal fails. Consider Julius Caesar again, not as a myth, but as a case study. Caesar did not fall because he lacked power. He fell because he misread the psychological terrain around him. By the time of his assassination, Caesar had already won. Militarily, politically, symbolically. His enemies could not defeat him in open conflict. So they moved closer. They positioned themselves as allies, advisors, protectors of tradition. They waited until Caesar felt untouchable. Not weak, secure. That distinction matters. Betrayal does not strike when you are desperate. It strikes when you are relaxed. When vigilance drops. When familiarity replaces scrutiny. Brutus is often framed as the tragic betrayer. But tragedy obscures the mechanism. Brutus did not act out of chaos or madness. He acted out of threatened equilibrium. Caesar's ascent disrupted the Senate's balance of relevance. Brutus's identity as a respected Roman, as a moral figure, as an equal, could not survive Caesar's dominance. So Brutus reframed betrayal as duty. This is critical. Betrayal almost never wears the face of selfishness. It wears the face of principle. People betray you while believing they are justified. They call it responsibility, necessity, the greater good. This pattern is not ancient. It is modern. In corporate collapses, whistleblowers emerge not when corruption begins, but when loyalty becomes costly. In social circles, gossip surfaces not when envy is born, but when someone's rise threatens the group's hierarchy. In friendships, sabotage appears not when affection fades, but when comparison becomes uncomfortable. Consider Napoleon. His marshals were loyal while his victories elevated them. But when his ambition outpaced their security, fractures appeared. Not rebellion at first. Distance. Hesitation. Delay. By the time open betrayal arrived, it felt inevitable. The lesson is precise. People do not betray strength. They betray trajectory. Your direction matters more than your position. When your trajectory threatens someone else's future, especially someone close, the relationship recalibrates. History shows us this over and over. The knife does not come from the crowd. It comes from the circle. And the closer someone is to you, the easier it is for them to strike without resistance. Because trust disarms faster than force ever could.